Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Goffstown Planning Board. This is our regular meeting scheduled for April the 13th, 2023. We will begin with, before we do our introductions, I will have Joanne introduce our new members to the public and to the board.
So we have two new board members, both for, one for a 2-year term, one for a 3-year term that will be sitting here. And we have Colleen Mayu and Brian Mazer. And
Okay.
so welcome aboard.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So David, we'll start with the,
David Pierce, I'm an alternate member.
Colleen Mayu, regular member.
Brian Mazer.
Scott Azana, Town Engineer.
Tim Redmond.
Gayla Breck, alternate and recording secretary.
Philip Devanza.
Mark Lemay, Selectman's Rep.
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
We have a regular member that's absent tonight, so David, you'll be voting on all matters tonight. Anything I've forgotten, Joanne, before I move on to the minutes from March 23rd?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So we'll look for an approval or correction of the March 23rd, 2023 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve him.
Without corrections? As
Unless
as
somebody,
presented?
once they were on the table for discussion,
Okay.
unless somebody has them.
Well, anybody want to second the motion?
Yes.
David? Motion to accept the minutes as presented. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain, please.
Brian, you would abstain, correct, Brian?
I'll abstain.
Yeah, because you weren't here, so you won't be able to. I heard you vote in the aye. So you have 2 abstentions. And Mark's an abstention.
Right.
Okay, the motion passes. Is there anything before we start with our first application, Joanne?
No, unless you want to go over the correspondence now.
No, not actually. We do it at the end of the meeting, that way we can get our applicants going.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we have no old business for this evening. We have two new business applications tonight. First one is map 5, lot 54 and 51. This is Mass Road and Tatro Drive. Joanne, please.
So I know the staff report looks somewhat confusing. I highlighted in yellow the items that they're here for this evening. Everything else is crossed out just because it's still part of their application once they move forward, but we don't need to discuss any of that tonight. So they're basically here to have a conversation with the board. At the last meeting, I believe they came in with a different plan, so they're here now. Well, they came in last meeting with a different plan showing access from Mass Road versus the Tatro, Tatro it's called, right? Tatro Drive access. And the board had viewed that plan and did not take a vote on anything. So they came back because the sewer commission had requested that the sewer pipe remain as is, but in order to do that, they had to add additional soil over it so it would be protected. But then it caused some issues with the fire truck being able to go over it without bumping the bottom, bouncing out, or whatever they call it. Bottoming out. So, so they met with Scott and the Lieutenant Connor from the fire department, and they've gone over, I think there's actually like 2 options now that they're looking at, but they wanted a chance, just the one, okay, they wanted a chance to talk to the board to see if they like this option instead of going through and putting all of their final plans together and submitting and then find out that the board's not in favor of it because, it's a lot of engineering to do. So they're here tonight to explain what they're doing. They will need a waiver if you agree to this because the grade will be 10% for the road versus 8%, which is required. So Doug is prepared to give a presentation.
All right. I will let you know that they did come before the sewer commission. David and I were both there. and the other commissioner, and we had a discussion, and we gave them our recommendations and a request so that we could have a independent review of their engineering by our
Right.
engineer, and they complied with that. So I'll
I
let Doug speak to that when he gets here, but they did appear in front of the
I
selectmen.
spoke with Corey a few days ago, and he advised that the engineer that you've hired was still reviewing things, but he didn't seem to think that there would be any issues.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, we are discussing the highlighted areas on this report, Joanne? Is that what we're
Correct.
talking about?
Yes,
So it's really only the first 2 pages of it, basically? Okay.
and then the only other thing I wanted to mention is, just so we can plan ahead, is the school department has requested, let me just find it in here, they've requested that a report be completed because they're concerned about the
School impact.
fiscal impact for their elementary schools and whether or not they have room for additional students. So at some point, you need to talk about that to see whether you're going to.
Well, I'll let you bring it
Go
up
ahead.
later on in the discussion.
Okay.
We're not gonna make that front and center.
Sure.
Board members have any questions for staff? We'll hear from you during the presentation, or do you have anything you'd like to present prior to the applicant?
So this was previously scheduled for another meeting,
Let me go see if it's
and
in
I
there.
had some comments.
Look at here.
Parks and Rec had some comments.
There it is.
So they were significant enough that the applicant decided to continue to another meeting. And since then, they have addressed my comments. And they were mainly about the rail trail and grade and crossing location.
Okay.
So if they've been addressed, I don't have anything against this proposal.
Well, you can, that's not, I just make sure if you had anything you want to add from a
Oh.
technical point of view at this time.
The big thing, they've made the rail trail so it's ADA compliant in terms of grades now. And that
We'll
was-
let,
that
we'll
was
let
my
them
big thing.
make that presentation.
Yep.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, if not, if we're ready for the applicant to come forward and make their presentation. You know the drill, Doug?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Doug McGuire. I'm with the Dubay Group, and I'm here representing Henley Investments on the application. And per Joanne's summary, to be a little bit more specific on that, really what we're looking for is when this came before the board, I think 3 months ago at this point, we had contemplated revising the access from Tetro to Mass Road, and 2 main items came up when that was discussed. I think there was general consensus that that would be a cleaner access point rather than going through the parking lot of the abutting property. But 2 concerns were raised. It was the sewer crossing and the rail trail. And so the first 2 things that we hit on when we were going to revise our design, because obviously our goal was to revise the design plans for this access, get it to Scott and to Joanne for their review, get their comments, get things addressed, and then come back to you. But there were 2 items that came up, as I said, rail trail access. The concern of the rail trail is that currently right now it is relatively flat as it comes through the property. But the driveway across from Mass Road into the property is not compliant. It's about 14% currently right now. So to adjust that, you would have to be steeper. The issue would be is that you're creating a platform that is not 2% cross slope for ADA applicability. So we had to address that, and we also had to address the concerns of a relatively shallow sewer, and although it has a decent amount of cover now, to be able to comply with regulations, there would be a cut down of that cover. And so we've been working to address those 2 items, and we feel that we have a good solution. Essentially, what we need to do, because of where the pipe of the sewer is in the ground.
Could you explain to everyone what the sewer pipe is and its function,
Yes.
please, so the
Sure.
new members would know about it?
So there's an existing sewer main that comes through the property, kind of bisecting through right here. follows right along the side of the existing rail trail. It's a fairly large pipe, it's 22-inch or 24-inch. There's some debate as to what exactly it is, but it's, we have it measured, and we have the exact inverts on each side, so we know exactly where it is in the ground. And so this driveway, as it comes in, as I said, right now there's an existing driveway to an existing single-family home on the property, and we're in relatively the same vicinity of where we're crossing. However, it doesn't have a platform at the entrance as you typically like to see and when approaching a main road, and it is aggressive as it comes up. So it comes up quite aggressively, then goes flat across the rail trail, and then continues to climb up into the site. And so we can't have that transition mid-grade, and so we had to make some adjustments. And so what we did is we evaluated the crossing to see what could be done. And just to give a little narrative of where we came. So what we have here, this is our proposed access, and this is two separate road profiles. We have a road profile with a platform at the entrance meeting DOT specifications, and then an 8% grade as required by your design regulations. And then we have one at 10%. And what you'll find is that at the most constricting point, which is, it's a crowned road, so at the far edges of the road, at 8%, we only have 1.38 feet of cover over the pipe. And that is fairly shallow. At 10%, it makes a pretty drastic difference in bumping that worst case scenario to over 2.2 feet. What that allows us to do, and this was coordinated with the Sewer Commission and with their third-party reviewer, and we've come up with a proposal that we feel is a safe alternative to allowing for that reduced cover. We're not as concerned about the pipe freezing or anything. It's not a cover issue for that reason. We just don't want damage to the pipe. And so what we're proposing to do is come in with a concrete slab that would be placed over the crossing area. So this is, if you picture, this is it in layout view, and there would be panels of concrete that would be placed on that soil to span where the crossing is and distribute any point load that may be from a truck or anything driving up the driveway, would distribute that load across and not create any point impacts along the sewer line. And so at 10%, it allows us enough room to still keep some native soil, roughly 16 inches at the worst case, and upwards of 1.5 feet in better cases along that crossing, and have a 6-inch slab of H20 loaded concrete to span that area. And so in reviewing this, we felt that could it be done at 8%? I guess potentially, but you'd have a very, very small amount of soil between the concrete and not much room for error. So our thought was having the 10% would be a much better design in regards to crossing. And we recognized that it was only a small section of the road, only about 70 feet of the driveway entrance, because you have a transitional curve here, you have transitional curves here. So we're talking about 10% section. It's a very small section of the drive. There's no 10% sections within here, nothing more than 8% anywhere inside the project itself. And just to touch on the rail trail, what we proposed is to, instead of trying to cross mid-block, where we would be, even at 8%, even in your requirements, that wouldn't meet the ADA cross slope. So we brought that connection down to the safest point to cross, which is the intersection of Mass Road and the driveway. And we did that in a gradual manner. This is with feedback from Rail Trail and the Recreation Department and with Scott. And this is fully ADA compliant. We're doing some voluntary items a little bit in addition to what they typically have, which would be extending some pavement, so that there's a clear transition that you're approaching an intersection from a safety standpoint. This would be a stop condition, this would be striped like a sidewalk or crosswalk, so we felt it was a good option. So with that being said, the only other item was, as Joanne mentioned, fire. Is there any issue from a 10% grade from a fire? They have no issue with the 10% on the face of it. However, they want to make sure that there be no transitional problems as it transitions from 10 to 2 or whatever. Some of you may recall that we're on the board that we had the same question that came up when we looked at Factory Street for an emergency access. That was more extreme. That was a 16% grade, and we still had it working without an issue with the fire department, but we wanted to make sure that we checked that. So we did a couple graphics for Lieutenant Connor that showed the road, or their biggest engine in profile as it came down at the tightest points of where it transitioned from 10%. You can see 10%, although sounds aggressive, it really, at the end of the day, isn't that much different. You can see that there's no bottoming out issues coming through. Lieutenant Connor has reviewed this over the last couple of weeks, and he provided an email to Joanne that said that he had no issue with the access. So I guess what we're here for, just very specifically, we recognize that you can't act on this application in any more official capacity. We haven't even technically been accepted as complete because we were revising the plan to be accepted as complete. But our goal was, it was a significant enough design change, considering that we have the Tetro Drive access almost completely designed, and that we were pivoting to this revised access. We wanted to make sure there wasn't anything that we were missing, that the board members had concerns about. We were hoping to get some type of a straw poll, informal vote, or just at least hear any concerns that you may have with this access, because if you don't have any concerns, then we would come back with full design plans with this as the access, recognizing that there would be general support for a 10% grade waiver just for this section. What we would likely do, just so the board's aware, I know this application has been continued a number of times. What we were thinking would be appropriate is if the board's inclined to support the waiver, we would ask to be continued, but not to a date certain. And we would request that we would re-notify the abutters of when we came back. What that will do is, I mean, we hope to be done this in 30 days. I just don't want to have to come back and keep pushing abutters forward if there's anybody watching. I'd like to be able to work with Scott on the revised plans, get him good before we came back. So that would be our intent, but we'd like to hear what the board's thoughts are on the access.
David, could you please enlighten everyone as to what the sewer commissioners were thinking about the cover issue? Because we can either one of us can do it, but I'll just have you do it.
Thank you. Doug showed 5 panels of concrete over the sewer line, and the sewer commission approved that concept, and we had your engineering plans reviewed by our consultant with the sewer department, and he concurred that the strength of the concrete was adequate to disperse the weight.
We also thought that the 10% grade was a better plan because it provided more cover over the sewer line. And for those of you who don't know what the sewer line is, it is the interceptor line. It's the main line that pumps all the wastewater from the village to Manchester. So if that line was ever damaged or put out of service, we would have a big problem in Goffstown. So
Joanne's rationale here, the reason for the change is to allow the sewer pipe to remain at the height shown. We have no choice. That entire pipe for a half-mile long is gravity fed, so there is no moving of the elevation of the sewer line.
It's all set up on a grade.
Just so everybody knows that the sewer commission was on board with the presentation. All right, board members have any questions for the applicant?
I have one question. I was just curious on the fire truck apparatus and the clearance. Was that factoring like dry weight, gross weight, or just?
We had gotten a full cut sheet from Lieutenant Connor.
Yep.
I don't know how much variation there is between dry weight or full weight, but I mean there's a fair amount of latitude still available. So I think if there was if it was loaded a little bit heavier and it was a couple inches lower, we still have plenty of clearance on the the tightest points on the truck.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
that's a good comment.
These templates of a fire vehicle negotiating changes in curve is the standard template we see on every plan.
The fire department reviewed all of those as well. those
Fire
profiles.
department approved it, it's okay with us. We go with their recommendations generally.
So I've got a question about, and Doug, I know you mentioned that there's a platform at the driveway intersection or the road intersection. I think our regulations require a 2% grade for 100 feet. Do you have that 100 feet at 2%? Or, so you're not asking for a waiver necessarily from 8% to 10%, but it's from 2% to, I guess how far do you have the 2%? Do you have 2% at all?
We do have a 2%. What we did is DOT likes to see a minimum of a certain amount of 2%, at least 5 feet for their plow wing to not rub against the the asphalt. So we're 2% all the way down into the low point, which is past the rail trail walk. So we're actually coming down into the site for a fair amount before coming back up in. So we're down at 2% here, and then we have a 2% transitioning back up, and then we have a 20-foot curve which goes from 2 to 10%. So we don't have it as 100 feet, and that's something I should double check in the regulations. I don't think we ever had, or really ever could have, a 100-foot platform, and I don't know if that's just for your standard, like, public town roadways, or if that would pertain to like a private site driveway
Well, I
as
mean,
well.
roadway design standards and,
It is a roadway
Yeah.
throughout because it's a multifamily, so you would have to conform.
So where are
but-
we in our development regulations?
so
What page are we?
page 44, the road design standards.
So you can
The
modify
maximum
your
grade within
waiver
100 feet of the
to
intersection is
include that.
2%.
So based on that,
Waiving
Colleen,
it to be 10.
I think what we would ask the waiver in that way, and I think the way I would couch that is that those standards, and there's many of them, in that section, as you know, that are regarding centerline curves, and it's really intended to be for like a town roadway standard for, a publicly accepted road. I recognize the regulations don't have a differentiation between a private. Joanne and I talked about this, and I don't disagree with you, Joanne, but I look at this as a site driveway, but the way that the regulations refer to a driveway is a residential driveway of 3 or less units. And so that's how driveway is defined. So I guess the only other definition would be roadway, but there really should be something in between a residential driveway 12 feet wide and then a town road. Because this is a private site, as you know, we're having a loop road coming in, it's different. But I mean, whatever, if that's the understanding of the regulations, if that's how your interpretation is, that it would fall under all of those requirements, then we'd likely have to expand our waiver request to cover a couple of those items.
Yeah, I guess my point just being that I've got a bit of a safety concern if we require 2% for 100 feet for a reason, just to, not have cars coming down at that steep slope. So I just want to see is there anything that can be done if we're granting a waiver, what are the safety things that are mitigating, cars coming down that slope onto Mast Road.
Mark?
I understand the design of your plan here. Why did you choose to go down with the rails trail and not up? Are the slopes gonna play a factor in that?
There's a couple items that was brought up by members of the Rail Trail Committee and possibly I think a few staff brought that up, but you're saying coming up over here?
Correct.
So the reason behind that is twofold. One, this is a private residential development, is intended to be a private residential development, and bringing the rail trail access directly into the middle of the site could potentially cause some liability concerns of the owners of the property, because you're basically bringing in the public right to the access, and do they want to walk around the loop and get a little extra workout or something? also, this land, which is all owned by the applicant, is being utilized for drainage. It's a good logical point, and you'd have to be infringing on that to pull that up. Also, to me, in my experience with other pieces of the rail trail in the community, you know, you do cross roads many times, there's several crossing areas, and it seems safest to cross at the intersection of the road where you have the best visibility of sight distance. You know, people aren't gonna be necessarily expecting someone up in here as they're wrapping in or coming in from Mass Road, but you're gonna be stopped here on Mass Road, you're gonna see people, you're coming to a stop condition before you come to the access. So, for those reasons, that's why we put it there, and to be honest, as long as I think it meets all the design intent, it makes sense to kind of be put either way, so.
One final comment. I agree on public safety, and I think that rails trail is a little too close to Mass Road. That's just my final comment. I'm here as a visitor and guest tonight. I think up would be better than down. It's just my final comment.
Other board members? Okay, it's a quiet crowd.
Can I ask the board one question?
You sure can.
We had talked, Doug and I had talked about, you know, the possibility of installing sidewalks here so that the school-aged children could come down and actually walk on a sidewalk to get down to the intersection before or for the bus pickup. Could we talk about that now and whether you would be looking for that while he's doing his design so he could include that or not?
Are there sidewalks within the project?
No.
So any pedestrian traffic would be in the roadway?
Yes, and I mean, and this is intended to be a low volume, low traffic area. Obviously, the throat access that we're talking about is only 70 feet long. You know, and to Colleen's point of what are we doing about, from a safety standpoint, about that access point, I would simply say that you're coming from a 90-degree turn, essentially from a stop condition, to turn onto this small section of the road. And so I feel that the intent of that 200-foot platform is when you're coming to an intersection as you're driving 35 miles an hour on a road, and that's just not applicable in this situation. We purposely designed this as a T intersection, mainly because we wanted some traffic calming, and also it gave opportunity for vehicles to turn left or right, depending on where they live, and get kind of equal access into the property. So, you know, I mean, these are good points being brought up, and this is why we wanted to have this conversation now, before coming back with a full revised engineering plan that wasn't going to be supported. So
on your cross-section for the fire engine you have on the top there,
yes,
you said it comes down from the state highway at a grade percent of what, 2% down?
Correct.
And then it runs flat for a portion of the ways, and then it begins a 2% incline for a short period?
so essentially yes, but
Show me where the end of the 2% is as you're inbound. Where does the 2% end on the going into the project?
The front
So
rear wheel.
right here.
Now, is that where the rail trail crossing is proposed to be, at the farthest inboard point from Mast Road?
The rail trail crossing is actually to the front.
What
because-
if to address the comments from our select board rep, if you were to bring it in closer, does that work or not work?
It doesn't work because the goal was, and this would get more into the details with Scott, but he'll understand what I'm talking about. We wanted the water that came down to not sheet across or pool at the connections of the rail trail at the bottom. So what we have here is we have the water coming in at 2% down all the way to the back of the curve. Now, if we were to continue that 2% down even further in, then it's going to put the driveway even lower and going to have issues with the sewer.
Yeah.
So we went 2% down essentially for 10 feet down into the site. And then we transitioned to 2% up for a fair amount more. I mean, we have, this is at, this is 135, so we're having at least like a good car length plus of no more than 2%, and then transitioning up from that. So, and that transition happens over this vertical curve here.
Right.
So no, we could not push this to here, because then all the water that would be just naturally coming down in these pockets would have to drain over the rail trail. And we're trying to avoid that. And we were collecting on the insides of that and then piping that out. I didn't get into the details of that right now,
That's
but
fine.
that's the intent.
And how close is, in your plan, how close to the rail trail is it to the edge of Mass Road at its closest point right there? Is it 10 feet in? What's the number?
So essentially, what we're doing is we're intending for this to be at the intersection crossing. So there's a 4-foot, paved shoulder on Mass Road. That's the start of the first crossbar of paint. And then there's a 10-foot wide access crossing over. I mean, I can respect the comment about safety, but at the same time, there's many places where the rail trail actually crosses across Mass Road.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, a very visible crossing, and I think you want to have that as close as possible. What we don't want to do is if we push anything further in, you're essentially getting a mid-block crossing, even if it's 10 feet in, because this car has to stop and then pull forward and stop again. What we're doing here is that they're getting to a stop condition as their only stop, and then they can edge forward to pull out.
Okay.
They're going to have the visibility from there.
Questions from anybody else? Colleen?
But to Joanne's point about asking about sidewalks, I think that whether it's a sidewalk or, a trail off the side of the road, I think something at the very least on that throat, getting them down to, like you said, if you're gonna have kids walking to a bus stop down there, I don't necessarily know that I personally would say sidewalks throughout the entire site, but I think at the very least something on that throat in order to get
And
kids out of the roadway.
The reason I say sidewalks is because if it's just like, say, a grassy or gravel area off the side, well, what happens when it snows?
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully the sidewalks would be maintained in the snowy weather.
Yeah.
Okay. Barbie, have anything? Okay, everyone. So if anyone have any questions for the applicant? So what we'll do is we will talk about individual elements that they've asked us to talk about, and we will just take a straw vote on how people feel about it. First thing is the 10% grade for this portion of the road where it enters the property. It's been described. Does anyone have an opposition to the 10% grade at this time?
I've got concerns about a 10% grade. I understand the benefit to the sewer line, but I've got a concern if the standard is 2%, that going to 10% is.
Well, we're not going to meet
We're
the
not
standard in any
We're not gonna
event.
get 2%. We're not gonna, meet standard in any event because of the sewer restriction, but I think that I've got a concern about this number of townhouses coming down onto this road, onto Mast Road at a 10% grade.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I could just add quickly, because, Colleen is new to the board, congratulations, and good to see you again. Worked with Colleen when she was in Londonderry. But I guess Colleen doesn't know the back history of the property where, we did have, and I think it's worth me just at least quickly explaining, I didn't bring a graphic to show that, but essentially, what we have, if you're not familiar, are you familiar with this area, or is the board members familiar that Tatro Drive is over
Yes.
here?
Yep.
So there's an existing office building off the back of the cul-de-sac of Tatro Drive. This property has a legal access from the cul-de-sac of Tatro Drive all the way through here. You can see this cut tree line, that's remnants of our previous proposal. There's a there's a cell tower that goes up the top here. Our proposal originally that we came in, actually fully designed, was a driveway coming from the parking lot, essentially, a parking lot of the office building, and upgrading the gravel portion of the access coming up through here to a paved access drive all the way in, and making this the primary access point. What happened is there was concern met at from a few different angles. One, abutters from the condominium association that owns the office building said, you know, we're a little concerned with cars driving through our parking lot, which legally was allowed. I mean, we had an easement to do so, it was, you know, kind of the plan, but I can understand their concern of people coming out of the building not paying attention to, so it was a safety concern that they raised. There was also concerns that if there was a child that was trying to get the bus, you know, were they walking all the way down to Tetro, and how was that going to be handled, and whether we were going to try to do, you know, other adjustments for that reason. So, you know, when we came that first time, many of these things were discussed, and we had proposed it that way because at the time, the applicant on previous proposals that he's looked at on this property was under the impression that DOT would not support an access connection to Mast Road. We met with DOT, Brian DeFosis, we actually met right on site, and he did not have any concerns with the access point. It was far enough away from the Tetro Drive connection. It has well in excess of the 400 feet of sight distance in both directions. He sat there, he actually wheeled it out himself while he was there. And so he said that he would be supportive of this connection. And so with the feedback that we received, we came forward with this without the concerns brought up about sewer and said, hey, would you like this better? And there was a general consensus from the board members at the time that they did prefer the Mast Road connection. And then we kind of found the design issues that were here. So I think I understand that, you know, we're asking for some relief, and you're like, well, you know, why are we asking for that relief? There is some context there that happened on this application prior to you being on the board, and so I just, you know, that should at least help your understanding of how we got to this point. You know, because obviously he has a right to develop his property, and we kind of have two options to come in, and that other option wasn't very well received either. So it's just a little bit of a balancing act. And if this is a better option than that, it's important that you at least know that part.
Yep, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara?
Thank you. Hi, Doug. Sorry I missed most of your presentation on it, but I'm familiar with the background. I just want to clarify where my recollection of this for the record. We're looking at a 10% grade because of design issues that came up in using this alternative. This alternative was not part of the approved plan. There is another access. I never heard that the abutters expressed safety concerns. I heard that the abutters were all set with the access that was going on. I'm not sure the abutters were ever actually contacted at that point, but I know that people talked about the issue of traffic through the adjoining site, but that was the design. And there were other issues with the design back then, including the drainage in the town right-of-way easement, that there was a fair amount of disagreement or not pleasure on the board about continuing with the design that way. So the design configuration issues that have arisen in both plans, and I understand Doug's doing a good job for his client trying to come up with alternatives, are driven by the site, the plan is approved, and what the owner is trying to do with the property, all of which could be resolved with a different design, different numbers, different things. So I just want to get on the record when I hear people talking about the applicant, you know, listening to these concerns. There were other issues that were brought up, and owners of property make their choices into regards to what they want to do. So Colleen needed to hear that there were drainage issues in town right-of-ways and other issues that really had not been resolved with the butters, and now we're coming through with this plan. So, thank you.
So getting back to the sidewalks,
No, we're not, we don't need to talk about the sidewalks right now. We're talking about the issues, and the sidewalk will be number 4 when we get to it. So we're still on the driveway grade percent at this point. Does anybody have, besides Colleen, have an issue with the driveway grade being 10%?
I do.
Barbara does. Bill?
I have a question, a little bit clarification, I guess, for, in my mind. We're talking about the 10%, because when we looked at the rendering up on the other sheet for the, at the top of the page. We're talking about, when you're looking at this page, okay, sheet 6 of 23, it says, when you're looking at that, where you have the crossing, the rail trail crossing down there at the bottom, where the, my understanding is that would be the stop sign area for the traffic coming out of the development. Are we talking about where that comes together, crosses over at the top of the pipe and comes down? We're talking about that 10% grade in that short period of time?
Yes.
Of length, okay? 10% grade in the wintertime. Do we have many of these in the town? I mean, do we allow these in other places? 10% like coming, my concern is it's coming down, you're coming into where there's a stop sign down at the bottom. The possibility of, depending on what the weather is there a possibility vehicles can't stop?
Or
That
losing
10%.
traction going up from EMS
Well,
or
I'm
reps.
concerned, because if
Or
you
nor
came
down.
down,
Yep.
you got a
Yeah.
crossing, and you going right onto Mass Road.
Yeah.
I think we can resolve this, and I'll ask Dave for his opinion. Did the sewer commission, as I recollect, not oppose 8% grade?
We did not oppose 8% or 10%.
Because they were going to provide coverage,
Yeah.
protection of
Our
our
concern
pipe
was
with
the
with
protection of the
concrete
pipe.
slabs.
No matter, whatever the grade was, we wanted the pipe to be protected.
Sure.
And the concrete slab did
So
that.
at 8% or 10%, the sewer commission was satisfied that
It
their
wasn't-
design with concrete slabs would be
Yes.
satisfactory.
Yes.
So I want to make sure everybody understands that if we do revert to 8% grade, the sewer
It doesn't
commission
mean-
did not oppose that.
Okay.
so the
8% is still gonna be a waiver though, correct?
No, it's a driveway grade, a road grade, that's a grade without,
they need a waiver to go to 10.
they do not need one for 8.
No,
No.
that's the standard.
That's the
For a
standard.
road,
So they
right.
would meet the standard if we required them to put it in at 8%.
Correct.
With the pipe protection. Okay.
Colleen's
Phil,
talking about-
there's a
Yeah.
You're talking about
I'm talking about the
2%.
100
It's not
foot,
just
2%
like
per
this.
100.
Well, that would
There's
require a
2%
waiver for that.
flattening out,
I understand.
but it's not
Yeah.
very
But
long.
once you're up at the top and you have the momentum going down, you know what a toboggan does. You have no brakes.
Yeah, traction, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I think, I mean, this is the first time that the 2% platform item has come up, from Colleen mentioning that. Scott, you know, in his review, didn't mention that. And I guess I would ask you, Scott, what your take
It's
is.
just something I missed.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. Where I'm going with this is that there's many items of a roadway design standard that I don't believe apply to this, because, I mean, this is not a 200-foot radius, okay? This is not a road. So we need to kind of, I think, if we're going to try to apply roadway standards to a private loop driveway.
Doug, it says in the regulations now, this may not be the standards, but it does state in the regulations that all roads, including private roads, need to be built to town standards.
I recognize that, but if this were a Walmart parking lot, would I have to have those curves within that?
We need to make a decision, is this being classified as a road or a driveway? That's the bottom line.
I did ask
What are
that.
we classifying it as?
I did ask that question of Scott and Lieutenant Connor, because I was confused because Doug kept referring to it as a driveway, and I thought I missed something. But Lieutenant Connor wrote back to me, and I think Scott did too, and said, our regulations state 3 or more dwelling units require a road, not a driveway.
Yeah, that's what triggers, I don't
So
remember what
this is
section
being
it
classified
is,
as a
but-
road, Doug.
Understood.
Even though you don't like that.
No, no, I don't, but, but that's besides the point.
But if that's the regulation, then we run with the regulations.
Well, I guess all I'm asking, and this doesn't have to be answered tonight, but if staff could review, you know, Scott, Joanne, to me, if this were not residential and this were an office park, and these were office buildings, would we still be trying to meet all roadway, public roadway design standards on an office park development? Because to me, this is the same thing as that.
Does
So-
it say dwelling units in the?
It says 3 or more dwelling units. I haven't
So the
found-
word
I
dwelling
haven't
units
found
is
it
in the
yet.
verb, in the language, and dwelling units are dwelling units. Factories and stores are not dwelling units, so therefore, that's a differentiation between the two.
Correct, but what he's referring to is when the only word driveway that's used is in reference to a residential, and it's when you have the 3 or more, it becomes a roadway. It could be under that if it's only servicing 1 or 2, because it could be like a shared driveway in a residential scenario. There's no discussion of a commercial roadway or a site plan driveway, because this is a residential site plan. This is not a subdivision. This is not a subdivision roadway. This is a residential site plan. And so I'm not saying, I don't want to get caught in the semantics of driveway versus roadway, but this is private development. And to me, whatever standard was being held for a office park or
Well,
a
It's not an
dentist
office park,
office.
so we're not gonna discuss office park.
And
right
anything
now.
we hear is private development.
Well,
Mr.
we're
Chair,
running with what's in the language, in the regulations at this time.
Which I believe I cited it to you at
So,
one point.
it's
that
the top of
this
page
section-
34. A driveway is that roadway accessing 3 or fewer dwelling units, while a road accesses more than 3 dwelling units. Then it goes on, the characterization of roadways as being driveways or roads in a non-residential and mixed-use project shall be determined by the planning board. So non-residential and mixed use, that's, I guess, within our purview to discuss and figure out what applies. But for a residential use, anything more than 3 units is a road.
So we're going to be defining this as a road. You don't, this is what, this is
Okay.
staff, and they're reading the regulations, and we have to go with what's written in the regulations.
So you're saying, Colleen, on that part you just read, I just want to make sure I understand you,
Yep, the
that
top of page
if
34.
this were a non-residential private,
I guess that
Yeah.
question is irrelevant, Doug. She read you the
It-
regs.
it's
The
a-
chair has made it clear that that
We would have
regulation
discretion
applies.
in determining grades in that case, because it's not stated apparently
Well, no,
clearly.
it does state it, she just read it. Any
She just read it.
non-residential or mixed-use
discussion should be
project
over.
shall be determined by the planning board. So
Okay.
that would be up to you to
So there's-
determine if it was a road
Right.
or
Right.
a driveway.
So it sounds to me like we're gonna request that you design it at 8%.
and would you support a waiver of the access not exceeding the 2%?
Well, we have to talk about that.
Okay,
I'm just trying to take them one at a time, and so we have clear language on each one.
fair enough.
So does the board concur that we would like to see this grade at 8%, as defined in the roadway standard?
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Now, the second item would be the rail trail connection. There's been concerns that it's too close to the road, but it's been explained by the applicant and apparently discussed with Rail Trail and Parks and Rec, and they both, what was their recommendation, Doug, from Rail Trail and Park and Rec?
They were okay with the design as proposed.
Okay. So what is does this board want to go with the Recreation and the Rail Trail's recommendation that it's okay,
So I can speak for a minute, if you don't mind.
please?
So I took a ride out here, I went both directions. You have tons of sight distance at this location, you could see that whole shoulder. If there's someone approaching the crosswalk at this location, unless you're not paying attention, you'll be able to see them. So that was that was the reason I was okay with the location of it. I would I would be fine if it got moved to the top. I told Doug either one would work for me. They made it, the grades acceptable, the cross slope acceptable. They're putting in the ADA panels. The paved portion is a nice addition that we didn't even request. They added that. It'll help with some of the erosion as well, to prevent some erosion there. So that was my reasoning behind saying it was, it's safe for pedestrians to cross there. I didn't want to see a mid-block crossing here, which also would have made so a mid-block crossing is when it's not at an intersection, for anyone that doesn't know that. It would have also made a weird undulation in the road that probably would have affected the fire truck access, so I wanted to see it at one of the intersections, so that was my reasoning.
So I'm going to go around the room regarding the rail trail. David, are you opposed to this present plan? You already spoke as a rail trail.
I have provided my
Colleen?
I'm okay with the rail trail
Barbara?
configuration.
Okay.
Brian?
Okay.
I'm okay. Phil?
Okay.
Mark? It's not okay. All right, so that,
I'm okay. I'll go with the majority of the board, and they're okay, I'll go with
all
okay.
right. So the second item, the board is in agreement. The sidewalk issue now, from the top of the intersection there, where the traffic is going to turn left or right, would you be opposed to constructing a sidewalk? What would we want them to make it out? Could it be bituminous asphalt, or does it have to be concrete? What would this board want to see? We do pave sidewalks all over the town of Goffstown.
Asphalt's fine by me.
Yeah.
So-
Asphalt's fine.
I think a Cape Cod berm or a stand-up curb berm and a paved sidewalk that meets the width standard would be, you're not going to meet, well, 8% you would meet 8, what's ADA, 7?
So ADA on a
Downslope?
when you're adjacent to a road, you just can't make it steeper than the road itself.
All right, so if you had an
don't-
8% sidewalk, then you would be in compliance with ADA compliance. So are you opposed to constructing a sidewalk for the school children to walk that distance from the intersection at the top down to the bottom?
That's on one side of the
One
road.
side only?
One side,
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you have a preference where?
Doesn't matter. Kids,
I mean, if that's the pleasure of the board, then that's,
okay.
I mean, we're gonna look into the school children question anyway,
Yeah.
so, maybe that would change thoughts, but we can show it and then discuss it. It's not gonna be a,
in looking into the SAU, you're referring to where the school bus stop would be?
it sounds like what people are looking for is like a paved connection from here to here.
Yes.
Yeah, and it gets people to the rail trail too.
Yeah, pedestrian access.
I think it's only fair to ask, because if traffic is, two-way traffic on that piece of the road, I think the pedestrians should be able to walk off of the road, especially children. I mean, adults can take their chances, but we gotta protect the kids.
Okay.
Colleen?
I think, and I know you mentioned curb, I'd just maybe recommend a vertical curb, especially with the sidewalk along the edge of the road, just so it's, not something that's motorable, but I don't know, I mean, if it's low speeds, that might not be a factor.
It's not that.
They can come back with a design, and we can look at their design and either approve it, but they are concurring that they would be willing to construct a sidewalk. I heard that.
Doug, we may require granite next to, adjacent to sidewalk.
I'll check that. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like that came up on Bog Road recently when they wanted to switch.
Yeah, it did.
So we could ask for a waiver, right? I mean, if the board
Yeah.
Well, we
supported
gave
it.
them, what did we do on Bog Road? Did
They
we,
wanted to switch to bituminous curb.
and did we approve that or deny it? I think it got
I don't-
approved.
I believe it was only approved in certain areas.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
it-
a much
Yeah.
longer side, that was a
think that was
much
approved,
bigger
actually.
sidewalk.
Oh,
Because
Yeah.
they said that the cost of the curbing was gonna be too much for them to put into the
Okay.
project
Yeah,
there.
I-
So we'll discuss that when they come back with their plan.
If we can look it up and obviously just apply for a waiver.
There's a winter complication in having a sidewalk. The trail is not plowed, so the snow banks are going to be on the edge of the plowed banks of snow are going to be on the edge of the asphalt.
Well, they're gonna have a contractor in there doing snow maintenance, sidewalks, so they can,
So,
the contractor can clear the one sidewalk that the
It
school
has to be a
children.
place where if the students are walking down the sidewalk, there has to be some place for them to congregate while they're waiting for the bus.
On
not
the
in
on the
pavement.
sidewalk.
Yeah,
Yes.
on the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing is the board willing to support a waiver for the 2% for 100 feet as stated in our regulations? They would make a formal waiver request for that, and I would like to get the board's input on how everybody stands on that waiver. I'll start with Phil.
I'm okay with it.
I am too.
Yes, I am.
So we have three people over here.
I'm okay.
Okay. Barbara, do you support the waiver on the 2% if they would make one?
I will probably go with the majority, but I'm refraining from comment now since I missed the discussion tonight on
Okay.
it. Tonight was the
Colleen?
discussion.
I don't think I can commit without knowing what the waiver is, if it's.
The waiver is to ask
If
for-
it's gonna be 8% instead of 2, or if, I guess, give me a good written justification or argument on why, like, how is this still meeting the level of safety that the standards require? So, I mean, I'm sure you would include that in your justification anyways.
I would, I mean, just if you want to hear it quickly now, my thought just is, this is a very small section of roadway. It is, you're not going to get up to design speeds ever on this section of the roadway. And I think the intent of that 2% for 100 feet is to provide an adequate amount of distance to slow down and stop from an intersection.
Yeah.
And this is only 70 feet long, it's not a long road. So that's
I
my
concur.
justification.
The 10% slope, according to your diagram, is 66 feet long, so 70 feet.
Correct, and now we're not even doing it at 10, we'd be doing it at 8. So it would only be just a short section of 8%.
All right.
That distance helps a lot with sight distance and queuing too, stacking of cars.
Yeah.
In this situation, it's not as big of a deal, so.
Okay.
So have we answered the 4 questions you requested answers regarding or input regarding?
I mean, yes, I think so, unless the board members, and I know we have a couple new ones, if there's any other items that would give me good direction as I come forward, but essentially what I would come back to with is...
Limited to tonight's discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any other input for the applicant regarding the items we discussed tonight? I guess
We'll
I
work with
guess-
Scott in engineering and,
So it's on the record that we concur with your design except for the 10. We'd like to see it at 8% at this time and adding a sidewalk.
I appreciate your time.
Okay, Doug.
That was very helpful, and we'll notice when we come back that way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's good.
We can put this one away.
I'd like to be sensitive.
Okay. Next application tonight is from map 5, lot 10. Joanne?
So we have Earl Carroll with us tonight from Sanford Engineering. The property is owned by Roger Blood. It's located on 99 Page Hill Road. This would be a 2-lot subdivision, as you can see outlined on the plan. The lot itself, as it stands now, consists of 10.951 acres. It's serviced by private well and septic. The house would remain on one of the lots and a new house would be built on the other. There is an easement shown for the house, the lot with the existing house. There's a nice kind of driveway that curves around and comes out the other side, but it's actually would now be on the other lot. So Earl will talk about that. And the application is ready to be heard, and there is no regional impact.
So I need a motion to that effect.
I'll move that the application is complete and there's no regional impact.
Are you asking for any waivers tonight, Joanne?
There are 2 waivers in your packet. One is for the soils and wetlands stamp, and the other is for wetland delineation. These lots are quite, well, I shouldn't say quite, but they're steep. And I don't believe there are any wetlands on site.
There's a little in the corner.
A little one.
There was a delineation in the past, we're just bringing that forward,
Okay.
not doing a fresh one.
So Barb, would you amend your motion to include the waivers for discussion
Subject to the
purposes only?
waivers for discussion purposes only, yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion by Barbara.
I'll second it.
Motion second by Phil. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. Questions for staff from members? And that includes Scott, because Scott is staff. Any questions for Scott? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to identify themselves, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Earl Sanford of Sanford Surveying and Engineering. Next to me is Roger Blood, the owner of the property, here to present for this two-lot subdivision. The first lot is the one that has the farmhouse on it already. As Joanne said, it's over 10 acres, almost 11. We're in an area that's, well, I want to make the point off the bat that clearly we're not trying to maximize development of this lot. They're going to be both over 5 acres. We're in a zoning that has 2 acre zoning. We're with 200, I believe, feet of frontage. We've got over 1,000 feet of frontage, so theoretically they might be able to get 5 lots, but it's a simple subdivision. We're utilizing a stone wall that's existing. You might say, why does it have a little bit of a funny shape up front? The reason is, this is kind of, will that read me from here? Am I okay? So you have the existing real estate here and farm from days gone by, and this is kind of the road, loop road that came up through. We've got a wall here, and the existing field comes down to it. So this makes a good delineation for whoever buys this. You own up to that wall, and we always try to use stone walls when we can. So that's the first point, that you've got the greater than 5 acre lots, and then the key thing was just to prove out viability, and to do that, a couple of things we've done. So we've shown a conceptual house. Keep in mind, all Mr. Blood is trying to do is make this a viable lot. He doesn't have a house design, doesn't have a building permit waiting to go in or anything like that. But I think we've gone through the exercise to say this has ample room to support a house. We've done test pits to show that a septic system would be viable. And then to control any drainage that would be created, we went through a process to analyze from the impervious area from the house in a proposed driveway. We've shown up to, well, a bigger basin here and a smaller basin here. And if you've been on the board for a while, this is almost identical to what we did for the Noble subdivision 2 or 3 years ago for whoever's here during that. But there again, I know there's some technical questions, and the key in my note is that this is conceptual, and it's tough for me as an engineer we have to use our imagination as to what's going to happen. And to me, the best strategy is to say, okay, it's viable, but when he's going to go for a building permit, he needs to come back with something that uses real data, because I'm pulling this out of the sky. And I don't think it's right for him to be required to do it as if it's one and done. We're looking for that flexibility, especially with the oversized lot. But I've gone through all the comments. There's nothing that's, the only thing for that comment was to what degree we're going to, want the sizing of the riprap and some of the stuff that I would like to kick down the road, because we're not at that point of finalizing. It's based on, again, a concept that may prove to be not at all what goes in there. This may be a vacant lot for the next 10 years, who knows? But that's up to the board. Nothing in there would stop this from going forward. It's just more time and money if we have to do more technical engineering on the drainage system. I've shown it with my, 40 years of experience of this will work, and I've built, dozens or more of them, so mechanisms to control drainage and prevent the post-development flow from being an increase over the pre-development flows. That's, I don't know, that probably getting too technical, but to prove that out, we also did site check to make sure there was sight lines, and we had to, the driveway location is shown where we can get the site distance required, and then we're showing, again, conceptual, but it has an 18-foot platform, which is basically the town's regs say down for 9 feet, 9 feet at 2%, I think, and then up, and we just put it in as a 18-foot platform with the note on the previous page that it has to conform with the town of Goffstown's standard detail. Yes, we can bring that detail forward and put it on the plan, but again, I'm just appealing for simplicity. But that's, in no way are we trying to shirk the rules as they're written. So we've got the driveway profile, we've got the site distance proved out, and then this is just to show this is the drainage watershed areas that are influenced. This is as it stands right now. We've broken into 3 drainage areas, and then when we put the conceptual house in, we picked up, we rerouted some drainage and made it all work so that, again, we've mitigated the impervious surfaces that would be the result of a conceptual design with, again, the appeal that some leniency to be given now with just the understanding that when something comes in as part of a septic design, which is how we're doing them in New Boston, as part of a septic design or companion to it at the building permit, then at the septic design we know what's going in for a house. So we're finally getting some meaningful numbers, how wide's the house, how, and so if there's a mechanism to just make it so that's part of a building permit requirement. But I don't know how all the politics work on that. I'm just kind of giving this as I always feel queasy trying to say what's going to go in when I have no idea. So, and again, there's nothing that is prohibitive in the comments. And as Joanne's last comment was, it could be approved with conditions, and that's what we would hope for. But we're at the mercy of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members? Barbara?
This is ag, right? So 2-acre zoning. What's the frontage requirement?
200 feet.
Yeah.
So what are the 2 lots have?
One has 440 and one has around 640.
Okay. I would just say, I don't like easements through property. I think it creates problems down the road. And I don't understand why you wouldn't draw, if you want to preserve that driveway, which I get, why would you redo something if you don't have to do it? Why you don't just continue that property line down and maybe get a waiver for the driveway from the lot line distance? And because what you're creating is a lot with, a chunk of land on the other side of the driveway that belongs to somebody else.
Well, I would, my understanding after being out there is that's more of a farm road. When we were up there, all the usage was from the upper section, but just the ability to continue, not that
Well,
there's a
then
lot
why
of...
are we doing an easement? If that's not an active access and you're just continuing it as a farm road, why are we continuing it? So are you effectively creating a lot that you want two access to? Because that's a different issue.
No, we're trying to just preserve what's there. We're not trying to, this is not a creation of anything. This is just the old road that's there. But Mr. Blood, and I'll let him speak for himself, wanted to say, you know, I'd like to keep the ability to use that in an emergency or, you know, to get into the barn. I think it would be easier to come in from the lower side. It wasn't, when I drove in, I could drive up to the barn, but I couldn't drive further. All the snow was
So
piled
if
up
we have
here.
enough frontage and we have enough property, why isn't it part of the lot that goes with the house that, and the barn that wants to use it?
That's what I tried to explain. That stone wall makes at the end of the field, makes a good delineation. If this, the person who buys it has 20 kids, and it's where they can say, don't go past that wall. And if we go with your, it's going to be an imaginary line through the woods.
It already is an imaginary line through the woods above it.
It
And you're-
is.
And you've got a
You're
well.
So you're not creating any new lines.
And you've got a well with setback and a
Would it,
turnaround.
would it determine the side setback for the conceptual house? Would the line, if it came straight down, make the side setback for the conceptual house too close? I think it's 15 in the R2, in the residential agricultural. As long as you could
My
make
guess is if we had to make it come straight down, we'd butterfly it and push it out. But I'd like Mr. Blood to be able to kind of explain.
Well, he can,
Yeah, sure.
sure.
Mr. Chair.
Well, Dave, please.
I want to pick up on the same theme that Barbara talked about. Subdividing the parent property and providing 5.7 acres for a potential new home. And right from the get-go, you're putting a burden on this new property by having 60 feet to the side of a house that's going to be built, a burden of an easement that has no necessity to be there. The parent property, in my judgment, is fully serviceable by the existing driveway. And I haven't heard any testimony yet as to that the parent property would be unduly burdened by loss of this easement. I would like to see the easement disappear, fully within the applicant's right to do that and provide a free and clear parcel to this potential new home.
Anybody else have any comments before I allow Mr. Blood to speak? Mr. Blood?
Well, just picking up on what Earl said, I think if you drive by the property or were able to go to see the whole home site, it's a very natural home site with the buildings that are there. There's 3 buildings in all on the 5 acres that are remaining. And a stone wall. It was an original lot line many years ago, in fact. I mean, it's not really a finished driveway. It's something that vehicles can access at their own risk. But I'll give you, I mean, just one example of the kind of rare occasions when it's become important for using. We had, as you all probably know, some pretty major storm damage this past year, and we lost some rather large trees on the main property up there that took some logging folks, Angry Oaks, I think, a whole weekend. The guys were up there and they had some rather large equipment that they needed to get in around the house, and they used that lower driveway with the wide, the wide area to be able to go up and get at the main property. So that's the kind of thing, as a practical matter. One, the aesthetics of the existing home that I'm reluctantly having to sell after 125 years of my family, and just the way it sets up naturally if you could see it, and then 2, the practical matter of an occasional need to access the property for if there's relatively large equipment such as we had this past year.
Anybody else like to weigh in?
My thoughts, I agree with what Barbara and David are saying, and I think that keeping the driveway, maybe adjusting that lot line, that lets you, keep the driveway but not create a new lot that already has a burden of an easement on it. Looks like that might be a way to, address your issue, but.
So it's starting to sound like if you want to keep the driveway, the farm driveway, you need to adjust the lot line to include the farm driveway in the parent lot and not use the stone wall as the line. If you're not going to be willing to make that lot line adjustment, I don't think the board wants to grant you the easement across that area so that you can use it in perpetuity.
I'm I'm thinking if I've got the 400 and something, double the amount of frontage, that would make there be a very large, ample ability for a large lot with a lot of frontage on it to hopefully comply with all your regulatory and zoning requirements.
That's not the case. The case is that, what they're saying is that you're putting a burden on whoever purchases this lot you want to subdivide, that they can't use anything beyond the easement in the driveway. They own the land and they pay taxes on it, but they can't use it because you have an easement in between there. They can't do anything with it.
So they're suggesting, Roger, that we bring the lot line up the edge of the driveway so it keeps on the farm and then head up the hill. And then it's no easement. Or just not do the easement and discontinue that section. So that's kind of the only two options I'm hearing from the board. I'm not sure everyone's spoken.
I think you're
but-
hearing it correctly.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not options. This is a conceptual plan and this is our input. And based on the input, that's what you can expect for votes when it comes time to vote on applications.
Tim, this is not conceptual.
I
So
thought he
with
just
this
told
one,
me it
no.
was conceptual.
No.
No, he's saying it's conceptual, so he wants some waivers because he doesn't know exactly where the
Oh.
house is.
I didn't hear, but the applicant said this is conceptual, that's why
No,
I'm...
we accepted it as complete.
Okay.
but for the
Thank you for
waivers.
correcting me. All right,
And may I ask Mr. Blood whether that's acceptable? Because
sure, you can
it
talk
would
to him
be-
all you want, he's your client.
If they if they were to vote on approval, they're gonna wanna see that change. And it's not a big change, but I don't wanna put you in a bad situation.
Do you want to take a break?
You can go out in the hallway for 5 minutes if you want and talk to him in private. You don't have to discuss it on TV in front of the whole world.
Yeah, go ahead, take a break.
Go right out in the hallway and have a nice private
I
chat.
would prefer not to do that.
Well, then I don't think you're gonna get what you want, unfortunately, because you've heard the input from the board members, sir.
Well,
And it's not,
maybe you can let this go for now and.
We can
maybe-
continue it if you want to continue
I
it, but
think
yeah,
I'm disappointed, but. It's-
well,
it's,
we're sorry that
I
you're
thought I was
disappointed.
complying with all your regulations, but we'll take.
That is true.
Regulations-
Is there a regulation that says you can't have an easement?
There is no regulation that says you can't have an easement. It's got to do with how the new property owner receives a piece of land that's already got a burden on it. It's got an easement on it. That they-
I know, but is it not a government overreach to then make his decision for him? Because that's a decision he can make. The buyer will be
Well,
well aware that there's an easement on it when he does it. So I feel like, here you're holding the regulation. I don't see any regulation that says we're not going to allow this. Can anyone point to me a regulation that says we don't want an easement?
does this give your property two axes?
It
Yes,
keeps-
it does. It
keeps the
legally gives
two
you-
existing. It keeps the two existing.
The two existing are irrelevant because now you're subdividing. So you are asking the board to approve a property that is now being subdivided, so that sort of piece goes away. And for most people, if they want a second access, they have to get permission if it's not part of the approval. You have the ability to do this subdivision without an easement that effectively cuts off a portion of the property from the new lot. So, you can request a continuance and maybe people will think about it and think it's okay, but the experience with a lot of developed lots throughout this town is that easements and use of property create problems. And there are lots of things that the regulations do not specifically prohibit, and in fact, you could do this and not put the easement on it, and your owners in the future could negotiate their own easement, and frankly, you and I know we'd never know about it. So, but I don't particularly want to be part of a plan that I think is somewhat misleading because there is a desire to continue a second access to a property and not adjust the property line when the owner is the one requesting the subdivision. I don't think that position is unreasonable. We don't allow easements for access. You have plenty of frontage. And
So, just listening carefully to what you're saying. I'm the one that's going to be keeping this lot that's going to be burdened with the easement. So, if I understand what you're saying, if I own that lot and I'm having to sell my long-term home up there, the buyer can come back to me and negotiate this easement after we've
Sure, you could. You could do a private easement yourself. We don't need to be involved in it.
So I can leave the lot line with the wall where it is, without an easement, get it approved.
But you can't use that driveway.
Then
That other driveway can't be used till such a time as an easement isn't granted, because that driveway is now on the other lot.
So you would need an easement and approval for access from the
Right,
town.
so, if we leave the lot line where it
Huh?
is, where the stone wall is, where the
Excuse
original
me, sir.
lot line was.
Hold, stop, let the applicant speak.
Yeah, if we leave the lot line where it is, which is a very natural thing, if you could see it, and I sell the main
parent lot.
property,
Yeah?
and I'm keeping the lower lot.
Yeah.
Where, and you're not approving an easement tonight,
No?
and then I'm dealing, I'm dealing with a buyer, and I can negotiate, if I understand what you're saying, I can negotiate with that buyer a legal easement where they can continue to have access over the lot that I'm keeping. It's just that you don't want to approve it tonight as a matter of policy. But I could end up having the same thing.
I have two hands up. Joanne, I'm gonna let Joanne go first.
The zoning ordinance states that one driveway is permitted per lot for the first 100 feet of lot frontage. One additional driveway is permitted per lot for each additional 100 feet of frontage. So I think he meets that requirement.
We've got
If he moves the
640
line.
feet of frontage.
No,
Again,
of the way
Again,
he's
yeah.
proposing right now.
You do, he has, the way the parent lot is set up, he meets the requirement. Besides, it's grandfathered. It's been there for 150 years. Point being.
You just said
that
he hardly
once-
ever uses it. It's not grandfathered.
Well, if it's a farm gate and he goes in and out of his property.
Oh,
owner,
is that what you were saying? It was a gate, farm
Well,
gate?
no,
Farm.
it has a paved apron and everything.
Okay.
It looks
But the
like
point
it
is that
probably gets used a few times a year.
If they're
from what I
using
can
it, no
tell.
one's gonna go up there and tell them
It's
he can't
visible
use it.
gravel.
No, I know.
I
But
drove
my
up there
point is,
tonight.
my point is, he doesn't need the board's permission. It's a permitted use for
No,
what he
we're not
wants.
saying he has permission. We're
I'm
saying
not sure
that
I read
if
that
he wants to
regulation the same
draw the
way.
lines the way he wants to draw them with the
Because it's
stone
not
wall,
under the same
that
driveway. It's
driveway
a different
becomes
lot.
property of the new lot,
Right.
not the parent lot. It's no longer on the parent lot. And we would probably make a condition of approval that the driveway may not be used unless they, no?
I'm,
This is like,
I expressed a desire. The applicant has basically said he doesn't want to do that. So we can go to a vote and decide.
I'm trying to pick
I'm-
up positively on something that you said that I thought
I
was-
understand that, but you probably pay an attorney a lot of money that you can have a discussion with about those kind of things. So I'm just talking about what, for purposes of the plan before us.
David, you had your hand up earlier?
Joanne answered my question about two driveways.
Okay, Colleen?
Yeah, so Joanne, I don't know if I heard that quite. So would the issue be, though, that on the new lot, we have two driveways? The old driveway that serves the
Right.
previous lot, so does that make the new lot non-conforming if it has two driveways? Or you're saying that as long as it has, you get one driveway for 100 feet and then,
Right, but the driveway needs to serve that property.
right. So
So if he were to take that line, like they talked about before, and just come down with it,
yeah.
and include his driveway where it is,
And
he can
that's,
keep it there.
yeah. But otherwise, is that a variance if there, is that in the zoning ordinance?
It's in the zoning, yeah.
Okay.
Can I have the, I'm responding to your concern, I think. If we remove the easement from this request and leave the lot line with the stone wall,
I'm confused why you don't want to put the line straight down to include the driveway and then there's no discussion. I don't understand why the stone wall is so cut in your brain that we have to make the lot line where the stone wall is. If you do like Earl suggested and just drop the line straight down, that includes both driveways on the parent lot. You still have frontage for the new lot, and there's no easement required, and it's a done deal for you, and you get to keep both driveways. But you're raising a red flag with the board by wanting to do an easement up through there.
Right down right here, right? Right down.
I don't understand why you
You
won't
could
get
still
just the
keep
property
the
line.
stone wall there, it just wouldn't be a boundary line any longer.
but for
But your
purposes
other
of your,
portion of the stone wall could be removed by whoever purchases the property.
for your...
Let's not,
for
let's
your
not
for-
get into that stone wall removal thing. That's another thing.
I'm just interested if for meeting your requirements about the easement and you're not being comfortable with that, whether we can eliminate the easement from this request, and then if later on somebody wants to have access, I can negotiate with them.
Where is it?
But you can't have two driveways on that lot without a zoning
Without an
variance right
easement.
now.
Without an easement.
Because
But we've got over 400 feet, so I thought we just went through that.
you have to make
That's 340,
application.
they only need 250
So
for
it's
two.
in a
You probably have to make an application for two driveways at that point.
Yeah, but that's not a can't do.
No, it's not a can't do.
So can you approve this without changing the lot lines any further if we just remove the easement?
I'm not sure it's gonna get approved tonight, sir. If you're looking for an approval tonight.
Oh, okay.
We don't always approve projects on the night that they show up. Sometimes we have to have, more information gathered, and we sometimes move them ahead so we can think about them and discuss them at the next meeting.
But if I could just address your question, if you remove the easement, then your driveway is on technically some other lot. So you would still need to either remove that portion of the driveway or provide an easement.
Or block it
I
off.
was just picking up on what I think you were saying, that I could sell the property and I'm going to keep this
Yeah,
lot.
I don't think you want to go with that.
No,
I think that's kind of going around the corner.
okay.
Maybe we should just continue
Yeah,
this
why
and
don't
they
we do
can
that?
talk and you can speak with your
I want to ask
attorney.
Joanne a question. Where in our steep slope regulations do we decide that a building lot is not buildable?
25%.
So how do we make a determination that a lot has too many steep slopes? Because I'm looking at the contours on this lot, and this lot has got some very, very steep contours on it. How is the decision?
But are they 25% or more?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Who makes the determination on the contours?
Well, Earl provides them on the plan, and we take a look at them.
Well, then that's
He's
what I
supposed
want-
to
that's my
show
question.
hatched marks on anything 25% or over. I don't see any hatched marks on here.
So is there
Well, you
nothing
have
over
to include
25%?
them
Nothing over
if you're
25.
requested to include them. But I mean,
Well, it's
if you
part
look
of
at,
our application that they do need to include 25% or more.
No, that's not.
if they're required to show them.
Yes, yes.
And what makes the determination that the lot has steep slopes on it? The
It
contour
can't
lines?
be, so the
Yes.
25% can't be included in the buildable area.
Area.
When you're
Buildable
figuring
area.
out
Okay.
the size of the
And
buildable area.
your professional opinion is that you do not have a steep slopes on this lot, Earl?
Not in the area we're
Okay,
building.
that's my answer.
But you're absolutely right. If you take some, where these contours go close together, there are some on this lot, but there's so much flatter land that we didn't
Okay.
include that.
So there's sufficient buildable area without.
Absolutely,
steep-
yes.
And hence not using the Winter Hill access because of the steep slopes on the top? Because I see you have an access to Winter Hill with this proposed lot, correct?
Yes, but we're not proposing that at this time, but if someone bought the lot and wanted to come back and say, I want to go that direction, then, again, that's part of that, trying to guess.
Right.
What someone would do. But yes, there's 55 feet of frontage
On Winter Hill.
on Winter Hill.
Colleen?
So, and I guess to that point, for clarification, there's really no coming back, though. If someone decided that they want to have their access off Winter Hill,
Yeah, they
then
can-
do they come back to the planning board, or they just go get their building permit and a driveway permit?
Once
as
it's
long
deemed
as-
a buildable lot,
Yeah,
if they
so
meet the
it's-
standards, we don't ever see it again.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
So we may decide after we speak that we will change this and add the frontage to the main lot, like you're suggesting. But if we can just postpone it for this time and come back.
Would you like to discuss this with your client in the hallway for a minute?
Do you?
Please, go ahead and do it.
Sure.
If this does get continued, I
We're going to
would,
give you 5 minutes, okay? We'll just sit here and relax for 5 minutes.
if this does get.
We created
That's only, that's
the
a bone
we
saying
created
get
the
a
questions, so we
conditional
want you to have an
approval.
opportunity to discuss. it
When
with
would
your
you
client.
suggest it be continued to, so Earl knows that when he's talking
Not
to?
the
No,
27th.
well, we would,
Sometime
if
in
it's going to
May.
be continued, there's no need for us to talk in the hallway.
Right.
But we're going to come back
And let us know
Okay.
whether to continue it, okay.
If it does get continued, I would recommend not the 27th, because we're going to be missing, we'll talk about that later, but we're going to be missing several board members. And it's the night of the laundromat
Yeah, that'll be the long night.
Do you have a quorum?
deliberation.
Do we have a
Well,
quorum?
that's what I want to find out.
If we don't have a quorum for the night of the laundromat discussion, we're gonna get sued.
Right, well, we have to have a quorum, but we may have a quorum, but we may not have, I'm
me, sir.
thinking that the applicant,
What is going,
Sorry, I just had a question. When you had a chance, you spoke your,
Well, I think they'll have to be out of the public domain, because there's no public hearing open right now, sir. But you'd be happy to talk with Joanne after the meeting, or if she wants to step out, she can.
That's what I was gonna request, that's all.
Yeah, go ahead, Joanne, you want us to talk to this man in the hallway, go ahead.
can I just finish what I was
Yeah,
saying?
I mean, he was right there in your ear, I wanted to
I
make sure
didn't
you
even
knew
see
it.
him.
I'm the advisor right there. So I
Um,
just had a question, that's all.
Yep,
if I'm thinking that possibly the abutters may not want to go forward with deliberations if there's only a few people here versus.
we're talking about the laundromat,
Correct.
okay.
So, if you guys can talk about that while I'm in the hallway.
Yeah, we can't really talk about the laundromat because we
Well,
don't have the.
No, we're talking about
application.
who's gonna be
Who's
here.
going to be here? Okay. Here's your question.
I'm out of town on the 27th, but I think that as a new member and a lot of history to that case, I would recuse myself anyways from the
Thank you,
laundromat, but
I'm out of town.
You're out of town? Well, if we're not gonna have a quorum, then we're gonna be in trouble.
Well, that's why we need to
What
sort
do
of
we need,
figure.
4?
4.
I responded to that, but I just have to recuse myself.
Yeah, are you gonna be there on that meeting? I'll be there.
I'll be
You
here.
there, Brian?
Yep.
David, you'll be around?
So you'll,
We'll have a quorum.
so you'll have a quorum.
Kimberly might be there too.
I think Kimberly is
said she
not.
will be there.
Oh, she is?
She couldn't make it tonight, but said she could do
Okay.
27th.
Now, we're gonna wait for the planning, David,
I have a new item, want to take up a few moments, sir?
is it related to this application?
No, no.
Okay, let's wait on it
Completely
then.
new.
Let's wait on it then, if it's a new item. We're gonna wait for Joanne to come back in.
All right.
She wanted to answer a question from the butter, because we didn't open a public hearing yet.
Oh,
We still have to open a public hearing.
So we can do this without Joanne. Have we sufficiently addressed, has the applicant addressed the waiver requests, just so everybody,
What is the waiver request?
yeah, why don't we can
so
do
the
that.
waiver request is, we have some wetland delineation from, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that.
Yep,
And that's what we used, we didn't go back and reflag it.
Okay.
Just a little bit up in the corner.
okay.
And what was the other? So what else?
Topography?
Well,
The stamps,
soils.
the wetland stamps, as a
the
result.
wetland soils, I mean, I'm a wetland scientist, and certainly in the area where a proposed construction is no issue. So, yeah, that was, what was the other one? I've got-
They're in our packet.
I'm trying to find it.
Wetlands delineation, soils and wetlands.
Soil, wetland stamps, and wetlands delineation.
Yes, okay.
So does
And
it,
you're a wetland scientist.
I'm willing,
Oh, there you go.
but it would take, it'd take quite a bit of money to do 10 acres.
That's true. And it doesn't affect the application.
Right.
Unless they want to build on the top later, then they'll have to flag the wetlands on the top later.
Well, I think those are, that's, yeah.
Right.
They were delineated up there, so.
but just to follow up on that, I don't have an issue with it for this application, but when something comes in, I don't want it to be a blanket waiver for anything in the
Oh, no.
future on this lot.
We would make that condition.
So that would have to be a condition, that the
Right.
waiver is for purposes
Of
of
this-
subdivision only and not for
With the
this
With the
subdivision.
conceptual site plan shown, site,
Yes.
house location.
Right,
And
and
with the fact that it's 5 acres, not the 2, it's well over.
well, and it's based on the representation, not as to acreage, that the buildable area
Joanne, would
is
you like to start again?
removed from the wetlands area. Because if somebody comes in off of Winter Hill, the
Yeah.
game changes, right?
Right.
We're going to start again, and we're going to open the public
And
hearing.
a septic design requires it too, for keeping the distance.
You're
to the
welcome.
septic.
Okay.
All right. So what did you guys talk about in the hallway?
Mr. Chairman, we have a solution, exactly what we said. The green line, we'll bring it down to the edge of the road, and it'll be a minor change to this plan. And I'm hoping it could be one that you could conditionally approve, and staff could say, yes, it meets
Are you
what we discussed.
Like I said, the frontage would still be fine.
Yeah, the
It's
front-
just scaling it and they'll still have.
If we were to draw it on this plan, it would be,
Oh, you're not making it line up with the other line?
probably, well, that's what I said, butterfly. We may try to make them equal areas,
You may.
and not change the area that's
I don't
on
really
these
care.
plans.
I don't care.
But either way, it's, we don't want to get into the pasture that's up here. But
The only
again,
thing-
there's area is not an issue. There's ample area.
So Earl, if you move that line down, would you continue to keep that extra driveway?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you
That would
might
be
have
the
to-
whole point.
And you'd have to
And you
ask for a
need-
waiver for the separation from the property line of 10 feet, unless you
10 feet.
allowed for 10 feet from the edge of the driveway to the property line.
Can
Okay,
I
Earl?
request,
No, I'm not sure I understand.
The new line you want to draw,
Right. Oh, yes.
unless it's 10
yes.
feet from the existing driveway that you want to maintain, you'd have to ask for a waiver for the property line to be too close to
We
the
got so
driveway.
much room.
So you-
10 feet's fine.
Yeah.
10 feet's fine.
They
As
moved
long as
over.
you draw it so that you have 10 feet, then you don't
I
have
get
to ask for the
it.
waiver.
Thank you.
Okay. So this would be an
That was
we would
easy.
have administratively handled this with Scott and Joanne. All right, folks. Well, let's talk about the two waivers. First waiver is for the
Development.
soils and wetlands stamps. Could you explain why you want a waiver for that, Mr. Sanford?
It's such large acreage, and within the 2 acres close to the road, which is a minimal lot, there's no wetlands, and we've looked at that.
And the wetlands delineation is the other waiver you're asking for.
Yeah, it's kind of both the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you understand that if those waivers were granted, it would be conditioned that those waivers are only good for the plan as you show it. Any other possible use of the lot from the upper side would require that these waivers be null and void, and you would have to return with wetlands.
well, or they could request a waiver again, but
They could request a waiver again.
Well,
The waivers are not in perpetuity for the whole lot, they're only for the conceptual house as shown.
so if you're in the air, if you get a building permit for the, I think I have the house in the front portion of the lot as depicted on the conceptual. It's
right,
fine.
and my only question would be, wherever they put the house and the septic, it's got to go through a wetland within, anything within 75 feet of the area. So that goes, and that'll have to be redone even when this is built. So I was thinking that anywhere on the lot will be covered down the road because it's going to have to be looked at again, but.
No, it's not covered anywhere down the road. It covers the lot as the conceptual plan shows. If someone comes in and wants to put a driveway off of Winter Hill on this lot, and they're gonna wanna put a house at the top of the hill where all the wetlands are at the top of the hill, then you would come in and have another wetlands discussion as you stated. But the waiver does not apply to any other development on the site from Winter Hill. And that's how we've been doing it for years here,
Okay, yeah.
just so you know.
I'm just not sure, is that like a full subdivision application, or would
No,
that be
it's just
something-
because if someone just gets a waiver for the wetlands, and the wetlands are all at the top of the hill,
No, I get it. I'm
and then
just-
they come in and want to build a house on the top of the hill, they can say, well, we have a wetlands waiver. No, you don't. You have a wetlands waiver for the house as shown on this plan.
Earl's
But
point
the-
is that the septic will take care of that issue,
Well,
but
And there's no waiver to build closer to the wetlands than the regulations say. That, we're not asking that for a
No, it's the
second.
delineation portion of it,
Yes.
and the flagging, I'm sorry. Okay.
right, just,
And
All right,
and as an
so-
administrative thing, that would be no problem. I just wouldn't want to, I don't know how you'd handle it as like a re-subdivision, but but I think, okay.
Good. All right, does anybody have any other questions for the applicants before I open the public hearing?
Can I, and I don't know if so
Colleen?
much for the applicant, there's a procedural question. The application checklist also says a waiver is being requested for the drainage study and sediment and erosion control solution. So is that really a waiver for a two-lot, or is
There is
that
a
not
drainage
typically
study.
required? There was a drainage study?
Yeah, I have it
Okay,
right here.
all right, so that maybe was just a holdover from when they originally
The
applied.
erosion control, I actually asked for him to show.
Showing it on the
That may
plan.
be some of the technical stuff that he was saying.
Okay,
Yeah, and
Okay.
absolutely.
So,
okay, so though, you're not looking for additional waivers for the drainage study and that's all been
No, but I
proposed?
would,
Okay.
happy to take the comment to add silt fence or a bio berm in there to to make sure that everyone knows that even though this is conceptual, you've got to protect. So, but that's
Okay.
very
Thanks.
valid.
Any other questions for the applicant from board members? If not, I'll ask you gentlemen to take your seat in the gallery, and we're going to open the public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak is welcome to come up, and please identify yourself for the record, and you'll be heard on the matter.
No?
You gentlemen are not, don't want to speak? Good. You want to speak, sir? You got to come up and identify yourself, sit in a big chair.
Oh, come on. You sat through this whole thing. Come on down here.
Comment or just have questions that could be answered.
All right, well, come
No.
on down and ask.
Gotta
Come on,
follow-
you've been
we
here
have
all night.
procedures.
Come on.
We have procedures, you have to follow procedures.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay, so you're not going to ask a question?
I can ask this question.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
I
Sir?
think,
Sir?
I think I have a partial answer already. I'll come up if you want.
Good, thank you.
Brian Cochran, 132 Winter Hill Road.
Welcome.
Thank you.
132?
Yeah,
He's up here.
just wanted to look at.
That's lot 5 dash, map 8, 5-2 on Winter Hill. He's pointed to the one he said he was at the top of the hill
Right here.
Right, yeah.
on Winter Hill on the cul-de-sac.
Looking at the, assuming that we had some sort of subdivision over here, I'm just wondering if future subdivisions would be allowed.
That is something we could condition, the board could condition that if they decided to condition that, but it has not been discussed at this time.
All right, that's the only question I have.
Well, it's not true.
You can't put that restriction on someone's land.
We've
Yeah.
done it in the past.
No, it's not legal.
Yeah, I don't think you're permitted
We
to.
have done it in the past.
It's, that has been on more of a full site plan and maybe in years ago, but I don't know that we could do it.
Yeah, it's considered a taking.
But I think what his concern is that someone may come in through Winter Hill, and as I explained to him,
And take out a 2-acre lot off.
he would need,
Oh, yeah.
he would need, if he was doing one
He doesn't have
house,
frontage,
he
though.
would
Yeah,
need
yeah.
200 feet of frontage, which he
They don't
doesn't have. And if he was doing, I mean, if he was doing one house, he'd need that. If he was doing like some kind of other subdivision, which I don't think he has enough land for, then he would need the 50 feet and build a road in there. And I think that might be impossible because it is steep up that way.
Well, and it would only be for 2 lots with the zoning.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be worth it.
So I misspoke, Mr. Cochran, I misspoke. They could come back and apply to subdivide the lot a second time. There's not any restriction against that lot being cut in two at some future time.
And I assume that there would be a letter sent out to abutters.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Go through another one, leaving like this.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like it's even possible just based on the land
To come
and the
off of Winter Hill.
requirements.
I won't let that long.
I don't think they have the frontage to slice it on the page either.
No, the lot on page would stand, and then they
No,
already
I'm
have
just saying
frontage.
if they sliced it down the middle, you
Why would
won't
they
have
do
the
that?
frontage. It's just trying to think of another way they could
Yeah,
split it in two and,
You get 3?
right.
no, just because you can't get frontage if you split it that way, so then I thought if you
Isn't the
split it
frontage
that
on the
way,
cul-de-sac already approved? Because there's an opening there?
I don't.
But if
it's
you'd be
it's
creating a new law of
non-conforming,
record, so it would need to meet the zoning.
though.
I don't know. I thought there was a lot of record there, because frontages on cul-de-sacs are typically reduced, because that's how the lots on cul-de-sacs are set up.
The reason why we put them there.
Okay, folks.
Doesn't look like those were reduced.
Now,
that
if no one
an
else
open
wants
space
to
development?
speak, we're gonna close the public hearing.
Joanne, is that an open space development, Winter Hill?
I'm not sure, it's quite an older
Yeah.
development, but those lots have large frontage, both of the end lots.
All right, folks.
I don't know that that was open space. It might have been before open
Yeah,
space.
I just spit on it. It started working right now.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right.
All right. Board members, how do we want to proceed on this? Anybody have any suggestions?
Well, if staff is okay, I mean, the public comment was really not substantive as to the plan. If staff is okay with administrative review of the new lot line to include the easement on the parent lot,
Yeah.
I'm
I'd like
okay
an
with.
opinion from the board on some of my comments that Mr. Sanford brought up. So I had included comments asking for some more detail on the drainage design, on the way they're handling the drainage design, so,
And these questions he said he would answer if he was to draw the full plan for you?
well, I think he kind of alluded to the fact that since it's a conceptual design, maybe these were kind of going a little further than they needed, so I figured I'd run them past you. So he said he'd do the erosion control plan, which I think I'd want to keep because it is in our regulations.
Mr. Sanford, are you nodding that that's good?
Yes,
Good, thank you.
So I asked him to label the riprap on the plan, which I think he could easily do, but then I asked him to include details with stone size and depth and et cetera for that. So I didn't know if that was.
That could be handled administratively by
Okay.
you as long as it meets your standard and you guys come to an agreement on what you
Okay.
want to do.
Okay, they're pretty simple things, I just didn't know if I was.
No, I don't think it requires another meeting if it's stone size and fabric under it. and
Well, I just
depth.
didn't know if the board may agree with Mr. Sanford that it's not necessary on a plan of a conceptual.
It is necessary, Mr. Sanford, you please
We'll
take care of the
concede.
DPW
Okay.
We'll
request.
concede.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. You talked about a drainage maintenance agreement too?
What about the spillway weir detail?
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounded like,
So I
Mr.
understand
Chairman
on,
was saying that we'll just go ahead and work through my.
Okay, well, I
comments
just, I mean,
administratively.
we didn't specifically say that one or
Yeah.
the next. so
Sorry, yeah, so
that's why I
that was
brought it
another
up.
one.
Okay.
And they're just small details for when it comes to construction. So, Earl, one thing, when these come through planning board, it's the last they see of them, and then the building department really doesn't have anything to do with these plans. So the only time DPW can enforce something like this is through our driveway permit. So we like to tie these site plans, in this case, the subdivision plan, with our driveway permit, and that's kind of how we can control the drainage portion of it. That's why I'm kind of asking for those details.
Right, and you understand what I'm saying, if I could make it an absolute necessity that it be done,
Mhm.
but wait for good solid information, that would be
Yeah.
my preference.
Yeah.
If there was some way to put a note in the plan that, you know, when the person, that as part of, in my case, I think it fits good with the septic design, because don't you have to approve the driveway at this point already for the subdivision level?
So we need a driveway permit for them to ultimately build on the site, but the conceptual portion of the driveway was just, it was proof of concept that you can meet the grades and the other aspects of the driveway permit, or the regulations. So we don't hold you to this driveway location, and when you and I met to discuss this, we talked about the fact the driveway could move, but we'd want a similar pond in size and everything.
Right, and I'm not opposed to that.
Which is why some of those details could carry over to, if you include those details, they could carry over into, some contractor comes through and he has some semblance of a design, he just can change the grading a little of the pond or.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why I put the cubic feet of volume that's required, because I'm not sure whether they're gonna build it there, but if they can prove out that it meets what I've conceptually shown, and even in Nobles, I think they reshaped it a little to fit.
Did they
Save
build that one yet?
Oh, yeah,
They did?
that's all built.
Let's stay on this application.
Sorry.
Yeah, but it is a pattern, whatever, so.
But I would like to say, Mr. Sanford, that because you have a very extensive drainage design for the under the driveway culvert that goes under the driveway there and the whole package, any relocation of the driveway needs to have all those drainage elements included in the new driveway.
No, and
location.
I agree.
Good, good.
I'm just saying, I hate to get down to
No.
a couple of days' worth of engineering to get it to the closest 100th of a foot.
And moving the driveway would require an as-built probably, wouldn't you say?
I
Well,
don't,
it's dynamic at this point, so the driveway
Okay, well, if you don't want an
location is-
as-built, that's fine, but
I don't know whether we
that's fine.
require an
You're gonna be
as-built for a
inspecting it,
driveway.
not us. So. As long as it's built to plan, that's all we care. And-
When you do the conditions of approval, could we include the fire departments, 1 and 2? They should have been in here.
Was the driveway gonna be over 300 feet?
No.
Not as shown, I don't believe.
Well, then the NFPA doesn't kick in. 300 feet is the minimum for NFPA.
They had some concerns about the throw, which we have no objection of, kind of
Number 2.
just making
just-
sure they can swing the truck in.
Right.
Yeah, so just number 2 then.
You mean like maybe put a longer culvert in or something just to allow for a wider flare?
No, it really has to do with the first 20 feet.
Okay.
Here, just getting,
Okay.
cutting it in so they can swing in off the road.
Yeah, because it is a narrow road. All right, we need to talk about the waivers before we move forward with any other substantive discussion. So Joanne, could you read the first waiver for
So
the,
I think we already voted on the waivers.
we didn't vote on the waiver.
No, we didn't.
No? Okay. Development regulations, section
This isn't even a long meeting.
3C5, soils and wetland stamp. And the second one is development regulations,
Oh,
section.
you were out, yeah, you were having the hallway discussion when we identified them, but we'll start with the first one. C3C5, soil and wetland stamp. Do we have an explanation from we had an explanation from the applicant while you were in the hallway discussing helping out the resident. So, board members, what's your preference on soils and wetland stamps?
Motion to approve waiver request for 3C30 as finding that the requirements of our ordinance are met in regards to impact and meeting the spirit of the ordinance as to wetlands delineation, so long as the house is built in the front part of the lot as delineated on the conceptual, and all septic permits, septic permits from the state are obtained and complied with, because they have wetlands requirements.
Okay, anybody want to second that?
Second.
Bill? Anybody want to discuss the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, abstentions, motion passes. Okay, C330, wetlands delineation.
No, that was that was C30, I did that first, because now I make a motion for 3C5,
Well, that's,
because given the granting of the delineation, the wetland stamps are moot.
okay. Okay, so, and for the same reasoning, Barbara?
Yep.
And who's making the motion? You
Second.
did, Barbara?
And Phil
Bill, you
seconded.
doing a second?
Yep.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, wetlands delineation and wetland stamp waivers have been granted. Now, any other issues? Oh, how about the fact that they only apply, motion, or a condition of approval that they will apply to the site as the conceptual house is shown? Are we gonna do that? Because we've done that in the past.
Apply for what?
That these waivers are not for the rest of the lot.
That's what C30 I said, that the conceptual, that the plant, that the house was located on the front part of the
Okay.
lot as included in the
Right.
Okay,
conceptual
well,
plan.
we'll see what
Gail, I
happens when
got
they
that,
come back
right?
with the next one. Okay, what are we doing next, Joanne?
We need
So,
condition 14 dealing with the parent lot, including the southern access.
No, because they're going to change the lot line.
We are going to do we agree as a board that we're going to let the staff handle that administratively, the filing of the new plan with the new lot line? It includes the farm driveway on the parent lot. Going to let them handle that administratively?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay with that, yeah?
That's gonna be before you sign the plan, right? So, I just want to make sure that, you're
No,
gonna be checking that
I'm
plan.
going to sign the wrong plan. Okay, I have very good watchers in the planning department. They don't let me sign the wrong plan. All right, Conservation Commission had no comments. Police had no comments received. We're gonna make it a condition, Joanne, that all the engineering comments from DPW have to be met to the satisfaction of DPW. And we'll include fire comments number 2, 1 and 2 if you want. Actually 3. 1, 2, and 3 from fire. Okay, the finding of facts. Barbara, would you like to read the finding of facts for us, please? Page 17.
I find that the plan meets the requirements for a lot line adjustment according to our zoning and regulations, and conditions of approval will be provided in the motion for approval. I'm not really sure. Are you supposed to do this all together? I haven't read the
We have to read the
cases on
findings
it.
of the fact into the record or we're
Right.
remiss.
Yeah, I know, so they're
In
in
the eyes
there.
of the court.
Just for clarification on that, Barbara, I know you read lot line adjustment, should that be requirements for a subdivision?
2 lots of.
Yeah,
It's not an adjustment.
yeah. I'm like-
Other than, I'm gonna.
They told me to read it, Earl, I read it.
Well, it is an adjustment now, because I have to go the green line.
For a 2-lot subdivision and a green line lot adjustment.
Which will be approved administratively. Okay. Is there any other issues that we have to discuss here so we don't move too quickly? I know I'd like to get this over with, but we gotta make sure we cover all of it. Joanne, have we forgotten anything?
No, I think that's it.
Barbara, have we forgotten anything?
I think we might be ready for a motion.
Any other board members that have any input on what we may or may not have missed? Do we want to go over the conditions of approval, Joanne, before anybody makes a motion?
I think they're pretty standard and picked out of the report.
There are two conditions on the next page,
Right.
but they're out of order.
The numbers are mixed up.
So it goes 14 and 15 on the next page?
Well, it should be 14.
All the numbers are mixed up.
The numbers are gonna have to go because I'm gonna add to.
Yeah, there's 2
Oh, they
6s
are,
and
there's 2
7s.
6s, 2 7s.
Yeah, the numbers are all gonna have to be
Yeah,
redone.
okay,
2 8s, 2 9s.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my frustration. Cutting and
What,
pasting.
did you
Oh, my
fail
goodness.
counting in grade school?
No, when you cut and paste from another
The computer
report,
counts itself.
the computer,
We'll just
She was
accept it
tired.
as written.
I'm just happy when the margins still line up when you do that, because inevitably I paste something that screws every
And the
margin
font's
up on
the
the
same
damn
size,
page.
right?
Word formatting is a
So
nightmare.
Joanne, could you just read into the record prior to the discussion, the conditions of approval that were added to your list?
My motion to approve would include that this approval is subject to administrative approval of a lot line adjustment for the parent lot to include the existing, I will call it southern barn access off of Page Hill. And that, subject to administrative approval of moving of that line and a continuation of meeting all the subdivision requirements as to frontage and lot size, that this be approved with conditions, the first 1 through 7, the second 6 through to 11 as to DPW comments being done to the satisfaction of the town engineer, and adding the condition that the transition from the Page Hill into the driveway will accommodate GFT fire apparatus for the angle of approach and departure.
And then you're going to continue with 12, 13, and then 8 and 9 on the next page?
Correct.
Have we missed any conditions of approval?
no.
So Barbara has a motion with conditions noted and administrative decisions as noted. Anybody want a second,
I'll
Barbara?
second.
Oh, you're right here, Phil.
He's just getting ready for his final
Any
motion.
discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on this application. All those in favor of this subdivision, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Both chair votes yes. Motion passes.
Thank you very much, I appreciate your time.
Okay, guys.
Can I ask a parting question if I might?
Is it gonna confuse the
No,
whole
no,
project?
Not at all, not at all.
Good.
Believe me.
Thank you, Roger.
So, now that we've included the, what I call exit driveway
Yeah.
on the homestead lot,
Yes.
would a new owner of the home be allowed to pave that driveway or improve it?
DPW.
Yes, he'd need a driveway modification permit though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it would have to meet the grades, I think. Well, I don't know, it's existing, so no, it probably wouldn't.
You said he's got
Once
a neighbor in there
once you
already,
take a
right?
permit out, you
Yeah.
have latitude
Yeah.
to require compliance.
Yeah, I just want to be able to help somebody.
You,
if they're looking
you
at it.
talk to DPW and get the answer from them, and then you can
The
pass it
guys
on.
in my office know more about driveways than I do.
Thank you.
The driveways aren't my forte.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Right, anybody, other than the other business, or anything else to move on to? We'll go into the election of officers now. Election of chair and vice chair.
Well, I will move Tim to be chair. We have a tradition on the planning board that once you become chair, you're there for a very long time. Though I don't know that anybody's hit, I don't know we'll have to go and look sometime to what the longest standing chair. I think Tim has done a great job this past year. We've had some difficult public hearings. So I move that Tim be chair for the upcoming year.
I'll second that.
You don't need a second for nominations.
Really?
But I can make the
Everyone always
second if
does.
I want
You
to.
can.
Phil's just showing
He's
his
on a roll.
support.
Because the
Right.
floor is open to other
Right.
nominations.
Other nominations for
right.
chair. We'll close the nominations and vote. Phil. All those in favor of myself continuing as chair, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Election of vice chair.
Leave it up to the chair.
So I have
Yeah.
a memo, or not a memo, an email from Kimberly, who couldn't be here tonight. She said she's open to remain the vice chair.
Well, we'll talk about the other thing after. The second part of her email. We'll just stick with vice chair for now.
Okay.
So Kimberly has stated she would carry on as vice chair. Do we have to have that election, or should we just let her stay?
Leave it
in
up to the
position?
chair.
You still have to nominate.
We'd still have to
What
have.
do you mean
a
it's
vote.
up to me?
It's getting
We
late,
just-
that's why.
Hey,
I can't, we don't select, this is not a monarchy.
This is early.
I don't pick
That's
my,
fun. This could
I
be
don't
good,
pick my
Tim.
vice chair,
Yeah.
but we elect the vice chair, so,
That's how the selectmen do it.
all right, so.
So
we
that's
wanna-
not how
Must be
you
more like
guys
the
do it.
select board.
I'm gonna nominate Kimberly for vice chair. Who wants to second it?
It doesn't need to be seconded, that's what
Okay.
you answered.
All those in favor of Kimberly staying on as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Good.
That's what you get when you're not here.
Well, I'm usually here. So we have
Okay.
committee, the last thing I want to do is committee assignments tonight. I heard from Kimberly in an email that she would take over as the CIP chair if we asked her to, because she has been attending as Jim's second for a while. And if nobody has any objection, Kimberly said she would do it. If there's a problem with it, we can discuss it at a future meeting.
So maybe we should discuss the CIP in general, I think.
Not tonight.
Not tonight,
Good.
but maybe we should put the CIP on for discussion, which would need to be after the 27th, because
Yeah.
I'm not here.
But it
And I'm
starts
the
in-
one raising the issue.
But it starts in June.
I know, but
It
it's the end
starts
of
actually
April.
now in the beginning of May,
But we
Oh.
have time, they send out the matrix, there's
and it
time.
goes until
July or
like
August.
the end of August,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah.
I've been there.
But I think we also need to have a discussion on, it's a subcommittee of this board, and we
Right.
need to have a discussion on what should be happening at CIP, because it has changed dramatically over the years.
Okay.
And we need to have that discussion as a
Well,
planning board.
let's put it on the agenda.
Okay, for the May meeting.
We also have a committee assignment to the Economic Development Council. We don't assign positions. We ask if anybody's interested in serving on the Economic Development Council. They meet once a month. Joanne is the
So they
economic.
meet the first Wednesday of each month at 6 PM.
So if
Their
anybody would
meetings don't
would
last
be
too
interested in
long.
being an Economic Development Council, we would accept your,
I mean, they're open to anybody, but we're
Right.
supposed to have somebody on it.
I mean, we traditionally have had someone on it.
We had Gail,
Karen was
right?
last.
I think Gail, too.
Who
was
served
on
on?
Gail was there for a while, then it was Karen.
I want
Yeah.
to, but I don't want to overcommit.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
It's only once a month.
Yeah, but
He
there's
doesn't
My
even
budget
know,
coming up
he
and
doesn't
all
even
that.
know what's gonna happen to him yet, so he
Yeah,
needs to
so-
wait.
You haven't got the big headache yet, it's
I
fine.
need to crawl before I walk.
David, you look like you're.
No, when I have a new subject.
Okay, well, we're not done with this one yet.
Do
So,
you want me to put that on the May agenda
so we'll put
as
that
well?
on the May agenda to see if someone would step up to be on EDC. David,
Okay.
please.
Having served 10 years on the, representing the town as a commissioner to the Southern New Hampshire Planning
Planning.
Commission, my 4-year term expires at the end of June.
Oh, good, would you like to go back?
I do not
You do
wish
not.
to go back.
So we're gonna have to
I've
have,
served 2 years as an alternate and 2 4-year terms, and
Barbara,
like
you
to-
served on Southern New Hampshire.
I'm still on
So,
it.
right now, it's Barbara, I forget the other guy's name,
He's the new
the
person.
new person, not Jordan,
All right.
something like that.
So I guess we have another,
David, and then I'm an alternate.
we have another agenda item then for the meeting to discuss, unless somebody
Well,
wants to.
If you want to,
I'd be willing
You
to.
want to do Southern
I've-
Hampshire Planning?
I mean, I've participated in other things with the planning commission, so
They-
I'd be happy to do that. It's
They-
still
they-
noon
They
time.
meet the
now it's like 11.
third.
It's 11:30, and I take responsibility for
Tuesday.
that. When I was chair of the board, I
think
told
it's
the
11.
executive director the meetings were too packed from 12 to 1.
Yeah.
And there was too much going on. So instead of making the agenda shorter, which is what I expected it to be,
They
we
make the meetings
started the
longer.
meeting at 11:30.
But I thought the last agenda that just came through for May, or May, no, it must
The
have been
one
for
we
April.
just had?
It's just said 11 o'clock for some reason. But you can
They changed the week this past month
Yeah,
too,
they've
so it was a
changed it.
different
It's usually
time.
Tuesdays.
It's usually the,
Tuesdays I can do.
Third Tuesday, 11:30.
And
they have a
you
Zoom link,
can
they send it
do,
out.
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
do Zoom, you don't have to actually go there.
Oh,
Well,
that's great.
there-
Yeah,
we
they
need
need a quorum,
They
of-
need
a
they need a
quorum of
quorum
the
of towns.
Yeah.
Okay,
Most,
And
And
I've-
you're the one that always.
I've-
and David is the one who always
I've
goes.
typically been, because
Right.
I have another job as treasurer, but that's
Oh.
not a problem for this board.
Okay.
so thank you, Colleen, for offering
Yeah,
to.
And thank you,
represent.
David,
I've
because
read your
David has been a
background.
Yeah,
great
thank you,
member.
David.
David,
I'll
you
let
get a-
them know,
We'll get you the
Sylvia.
merit
I'm gonna
badge.
leave here
Sylvia, what
very
am I
happy.
saying? I'll
We'll
let
get you the merit badge.
Weight off your shoulders.
And the last thing, I asked Joanne when the last time we reviewed impact fees was, and nobody seems to remember. So we are going to invite the department heads in for an informal meeting so that they can express what their requests or opinions are. Joanne, tell the board about what the town has put money in for.
So the town, I believe, put $10,000 in our budget, because I spoke with Derek a few months ago about this. Some of the impact fees, I believe it was public safety, has been reviewed more than a few years ago, but most of them are like really old, maybe 2011. So the whole thing needs to be rehauled. So he wants to hire a consultant, but I need to talk to him about whether on $10,000, I don't think we need to go out to bid. I think we just need to get 3 quotes. And I've already talked to Mark Fougere, who said he's doing this now, because the person who used to do all of them was Bruce Mayberry, who
That's
was
right.
very well known in the state for doing impact fee studies, and he's since retired, so.
Well, let's drag him out of retirement.
So Mark said he's taken over, and Nate mentioned to me from Southern New Hampshire that he's done a couple of them.
Okay.
But I think this might be a little more confusing because it hasn't been done for so long.
All right, well, maybe I'll come in and, maybe we should copy the statute and what they are now and what the basis is
Yeah.
now, because, we start having these discussions and we don't know where we are now.
Yeah,
It's not much
and there's a
fun.
couple of things that are really mixed up. I don't know how it happened, but for
I'm sure it's
instance,
all fine, we can talk about
a 2-family pays less impact fees than someone adding on an ADU.
Okay, well, this is where we need to correct the ship.
Yeah.
How does the board feel? Should we get the results of the study first and then bring department heads in to have an informal discussion, or would you like to have the department heads in to tell us what their thoughts are, and then we can apply that information, or bring them back a second time once we get the study done?
I think we need to have a discussion on what they are.
Right.
What are what?
Impact fees. Anybody, does, I mean, we get requests in certain
You know
developments.
the numbers.
Well, not everybody knows the numbers.
Oh.
We have new members. We haven't actually talked about them, and we haven't had a proposal in a while that's addressed
For a
impact
si-
fees specifically. We
I
don't know.
remember discussing them at a meeting one time, and we voted not to increase impact
Right,
fees.
so I think we need to sort of.
For
I
a
do remember that
single-family
meeting.
home,
I think Alan was
it's
on the
about
board back then.
$8,900.
I was gonna go in my books, see if I can find any information on it.
That what, I'm sorry?
For a single-family home, it's about $8,900.
I know, so, but we really don't have, as board members, we really don't have
And
any
very briefly, I'd
information.
like to also
Okay.
discuss the fact that when these over 55 projects come in and ask for a waiver from the school impact fee, I don't think we should be granting them any more, because after 10 years, those over 55 units can convert to market rental and put all the kids in them they want.
Well, and over 55 doesn't mean nobody, I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have a
right, exactly.
restriction, there's nobody.
So we have granted over 55 waivers for school impact fees in the past, and I believe that was a mistake.
And that's also in our regulations, that the board would have to grant a waiver, I believe. They have to approve it. I don't know if it's a waiver, but they have to approve it, for 55.
Where do we stand on our development reg rewrite?
Yeah,
So we
definitely.
received the first draft, what, about a week ago? And we've been so busy that just Eric, Scott, and myself are supposed to be looking at it before we bring it forward to the board. And we've just been like,
So you haven't
it's
had a
like
chance.
super
Okay, but we
busy up there.
have actually a product from
We
the
do,
vendor.
yeah.
Because this has been a long time.
Yep. This always happens.
I know.
Every time we put something out for bid. We also have did you get this in front of you? Was it left on your table? Someone who's looking to
Oh, yeah.
volunteer for the planning board.
Where is it?
I have an extra copy if
Yeah.
anyone needs one.
Was with the stuff back.
Is it in the chair's package?
It should be just
Yeah.
left on the table,
Regina Smith we have.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have any openings on the board, and there was a motion at one point in time, this was before I worked here, that you were limiting the alternates to 2. But when I read the rules and regulations recently, when I gave them to the 2 new board members, it still says 5. So that was never changed. So there would need to be, that would need to be considered an amendment to the rules and regulations, and I believe you have to have a public hearing
Don't
on
we
that.
presently have an application on file for a volunteer application? I
This
think
one
we had a
here.
volunteer application in the last year that we said thanks, but
That was the fellow who ran for the 3-year seat.
well, I'm just saying, if we have an application that's already on file, we can't ignore it. So, I
Right,
mean, we have
well,
another one here.
You addressed it and told me to tell him that elections were coming up and that he might consider running, and that's what
Because
he
we
wound
had
up
our
doing.
alternates filled.
But, yeah, we said it was 2, but if Joanne says it's 5, then we were in error.
Well, the rules and regulations say it's 5, but at one point in time, I think it was around maybe 2015 or 16, there was a vote taken to say that you were limiting it to 2 alternates.
But we never corrected the
Right,
handbook or
So
whatever.
currently, right now, we have 2,
we have to,
and that's what it is.
right.
Because I think, my recollection is that when we had the amount of alternates, it became a frustration, because you have members sitting here. They're not voting members unless you have an opening, because somebody's not here to fill in, like David was earlier, okay? And then you had the frustration when they don't come, because we come here, all right, and you've got 4 alternates, but you only have 1 that could be, so you wound up rotating through the course of the night for 1, and then some people, it just got, I don't have time for this nonsense.
You know, people get discouraged.
Right, and which you can understand.
Yeah.
And then where you ran into the other issues were when you have your rehearing, okay, because you're coming back. Well, who was the alternate at that time? Well, so with all of that went on, we chose to go keep with two.
It sounds like if there was a vote for 2, and that's been the understanding, then it's just kind of a Scrivener's error that the regulations weren't necessarily
Right.
what they say.
Updated.
So I
Yeah.
think that probably procedurally, I mean, you're just
Just change it
gonna, you're
to
changing
2.
it to 2.
Now, not next meeting, but the meeting after, I'll hand out the rules and regulations. They haven't been changed since 2014, so if you want to read through them and see if there's anything you may want to change.
But changes are discussions, and discussions go on forever, so let's just
That's
leave
right.
them.
That's my chair, Tim.
A motion to adjourn.
By the way,
That's
do we have
the
any
motion we're waiting for.
Barbara, does the board recommends Southern New Hampshire representative and to the select board?
Just gotta go to call.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
So our recommendation will be for Colleen to serve
yep.
in the next term.
All right,
and-
I'll make a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that Colleen be appointed to the Southern New Hampshire planning position.
Effective 1 July?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to appoint Colleen, recommends Colleen to the Board of Selectmen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion to
Opposed,
adjourn.
abstention? Phil, you're in holding pattern right now. Anybody else have anything before I entertain Phil's motion? Motion to adjourn has been made by Phil. Anybody want to second it?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Everybody second it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Good night, everybody.
Nobody's opposed to staying longer?
Did you, so